Hi, everybody, and welcome. We just got started, so I see that the attendees are trickling in. So I'm just going to give it a couple seconds, and we'll get started. We're going to hear from quite a few folks today, so I think we're going to get started as quickly as possible. And we can just have people come in as they come in. All right. Okay. So hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Maytal Kowalski, and I'm the Executive Director of JSpaceCanada. At JSpaceCanada, our vision is a future of self-determination and sovereignty for Jews and Palestinians in Israel-Palestine, championed by Canadian Jews. We do this in three ways: shifting conversations within the Jewish community, from our public institutions to our Shabbat tables, working with other communities and allies and advocating at a political level for the preservation and promotion of a two-state solution in Israel-Palestine, and allying with other communities and opening conversations with them. Before we proceed, I would like to acknowledge that this event is taking place on the ancestral homeland of Indigenous peoples across Canada, caretakers and stewards of this land for time immemorial, each with their own unique traditions, languages, and history. For me personally, I'm currently speaking to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, also known as Vancouver, British Columbia. You know, a couple years ago, had we been meeting on a day such as today, we would likely just mark it by wishing each other a Shana Tova, a Happy New Year, as we just finished observing Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, this past Friday. We would possibly end by wishing each other an easy and meaningful fast in anticipation of Yom Kippur, a day of atonement and repentance on which we fast, just coming up this Friday. These days are typically referred to as the days of awe, or in Hebrew, Yamim Noraim. In modern day Hebrew, Noraim, or the singular, Nora, has also taken on a negative connotation. It can mean something awful or horrible. The duality of this meaning, that we are in the days of awe, but also in these horrible days, accurately reflects today, I think, as we contend with this period of holiday and the hope and optimism of a new year, while also commemorating what will be tomorrow 1 year since the horrific Hamas terror attacks in Israel, in which more than 1,200 people were killed and 6,900 others injured. 689 Israel Defense Forces soldiers have been killed since October 7th, and over 4,000 wounded. Over 250 people, Israelis, both Jewish and Palestinian, foreign nationals, and dual citizens, were taken hostage to Gaza. 105 were released during a 6-day ceasefire at the end of November. 8 were rescued by the IDF, and 4 were released by Hamas. 37 bodies have been repatriated to Israel. Over 100,000 Israelis have been displaced from both the north and south of the country, with no clear timeline or resolution for return. This duality is also felt in our struggle between the particular and the universal. Our care, pain, and heartache for the Jewish people, for the Jewish state, our love for Israel and concern for it, while also being unable to ignore the devastation in Gaza, the occupied West Bank, and Lebanon, which has followed the October 7th attacks for what will be a year tomorrow. Over 41,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed, over 95,000 injured, and close to 2 million displaced. Over 300 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank since October 7th, with many others victims of settler violence or displacement. There have been over 500 people killed in the strikes in Lebanon, including 2 Canadians, with 1 million Lebanese displaced from their homes. Just earlier this week, many of us frantically called, texted, and emailed our friends, family, and loved ones in Israel, as over 150 Iranian ballistic missiles rained down on the country in just 15 terrifying minutes. And today, we mourn and send our condolences to the family and loved ones of those killed and wounded in a terrorist attack at a bus stop in southern Israel, and those killed and wounded in an Israeli strike on a mosque in Gaza. So now we join together precisely because of this moment, as we grapple with these days of awe/awfulness, as we hold the pain of our people and the pain of others, and as we fight for a better future. I want to turn it over now to Rabbah Gila Kane of Temple Beth Ora in Edmonton, Alberta, to offer us a prayer.
Thank you, Maytal, and thank you, JSpace, and thank you everyone for being here with us today. My name is Gila. I'm originally from Israel. I'm Israeli, from Yerushalayim, from Jerusalem. I've been living in Canada for 7 years and serving as a rabbi at Temple Beth Ora. And I'd like to share a prayer for peace, a prayer for opening a gate at the closing of a gate from the Israeli Reform Siddur. And this prayer was written by Rabbi Dalia Marks, originally in Hebrew, but I'll read the English translation for all of us. And I see, we're going to share the Hebrew and the English on the screen here so you can follow. פתח לנו שער בעת נעילת שער. אלוהי הרוחות לכל בשר. Grant us the courage to continue to right the wrongs of the past, even if it comes with a painful price, so that our land will be a blessing for all its inhabitants, its neighbors, and all who are in the world. Shechina, Mekor HaRachamim, at the dawning of our commitment to doing justice, protect the state of Israel, the dawning of our redemption. It is a living tapestry with thousands of hues and colors. May it not unravel nor come asunder. Guard it, lest no one should arise from amongst us and in their misery wound it. Avinu Malkeinu, during times of disengagement, to mend the divisions. At times of separation, not to cut down new shoots. When anger swells up, to embrace. At times of emptying out, to cooperate and include. In your light, we see light even as the sky darkens. Answer us when we call to you. Open a gate at the closing of a gate. God, create a pure heart in us and renew a willing spirit within us. And we shall not know how to worship Adonai until we arrive there. May we have a good and peaceful and healing new year. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ben Moraine, and I'm the Executive Director of the New Israel Fund of Canada. We're the leading organization in Canada supporting the Israelis on the ground fighting for democracy, equality, and peace. It's impossible to grasp that this has been nearly a year since the atrocities of October 7th, and that Israel is still at war, and the reports of casualties on both sides continue to come in nearly every day. How do we hold all of this pain felt by so many different people in Israel and Palestine and throughout the region and the world? Earlier this summer, we saw a powerful example of how we can do just that, led by Israelis in the thousands. On July 1st, over 50 pro-peace organizations organized a peace event in Tel Aviv's Menorah Arena. Over 6,000 people attended. 6,000 Jews and Palestinians, young and old, from the country's urban center and from the periphery, for one of the largest peace events since October 7th. The event was organized under the slogan, Hagiah Hazman, it's time. It called for reaching a ceasefire deal, stopping the war, and signing a political agreement, it's time to make peace. On that stage, that day, there were families of hostages and October 7th victims, as well as musicians, cultural figures, including Israeli historian and author Yuval Noah Hariri, Knesset members Nama Lazimi, Gilad Karib, Ayman Odeh, and a slew of other public figures and fellow parliamentarians, past and present, in committing themselves to a call for the return of hostages from Gaza and for an end to the war. One moment stood out above all others. A moment on that stage where Jews and Arabs who lost someone on or after October 7th stood together, shared their pain, and demonstrated to us and to the world how to leverage their terrible loss into a determination for safety, security, and freedom for all of them. Let's watch that moment now.
אני יותם קיפניס, בן קיבוץ בארי. ההורים שלי, הדוד שלי והמטפל של אבא שלי נרצחו ב7 באוקטובר. 10 מבני ובנות משפחתי נחטפו לעזה. 9 שוחררו. אחד מהם, טל, עדיין שם. הוא חייב לחזור הביתה.
أنا بشير الزيادنة من رهط، عمري 28 سنة، طالب أكاديمي وناشط اجتماعي. في 7/10 انخطفوا 4 من قرايبي وقتل قريب آخر. 2 من المخطوفين عادوا و2 ما زالوا في الأسر. اليوم أنا بتطوع في منتدى عائلات المخطوفين لإعادة بقية قرايبي اللي ما زالوا في الأسر.
שמי אילנה קמינקה מצור הדסה. איבדתי את בני הבכור והאהוב, סגן ינאי קמינקה, שנהרג בקרב ההגנה על בסיס סיקים ב7 באוקטובר. ינאי עבד בלראות את הכאבים ואת האור בכל אדם, ואנו ממשיכים בדרך שלו.
אני יעקב גודו, בן 75, חבר קיבוץ נען. איבדתי את בננו תום שנרצח בממ"ד שבביתו בקיבוץ כיסופים. על קברו נשבעתי שאעלה לירושלים, אשב מול הכנסת ואתבע את התפטרות הממשלה והעומד בראשה. אני שם במאהל עד שהם ילכו.
أنا ثابت أبو راس ابن مدينة قلنسوة، وبسبب النكبة في العام 48 تم الفصل بين عائلة أمي وعائلة أبي. عائلة أمي تعيش في مخيمات اللاجئين في غزة، حيث استشهد 24 من أفرادها منذ 7 أكتوبر. يجب وقف الحرب حالا والتقدم نحو سلام يضمن الحقوق المتساوية للشعبين في الوطن.
אני נוגה פרידמן, בת 42 ואם ל3 מבן שמן. ב7 באוקטובר איבדתי את עידו רוזנטל אהובי, לוחם של דג שנפל כשעזר להציל את קיבוץ אלומים. אני לא הסכמתי לשלם את המחיר היום הזה, ואני לא רוצה שאף אחת משום צד תסכים לשלם אותו. זה קשה מדי.
אני אבי דבוש, התגוררתי כ16 שנים בעוטף עזה, בברור חיל, שדרות ונירים. ב7 באוקטובר שהייתי עם משפחתי למעלה מ30 שעות בממ"דים בנירים, תחת התקפת חמאס, עד לפינוי לאילת, וכיום לבאר שבע. אוטוטו מוסמך לרבנות ישראלית, מייסד תנועת הפריפריות ומחבר הספר מרד הפריפריות. אני מאמין.
אני נועם דן, בת קיבוץ דן בצפון המופקר, חיה בירושלים, בירת ישראל המפוצלת, אמא של בועז ובארי איילה. ב7 באוקטובר נרצחו בקיבוץ ניר עוז דודתי כרמלה ודודניתי נויה, זיכרונן לאהבה. ביום הארור הזה נחטפו 3 מקרובי משפחתי. 2 מהחטופים שבו, עופר עדיין שם. מעל 9 חודשים אני נלחמת על חיי החטופות והחטופים שנותרו בשבי, ועל תקומת המדינה שלנו.
אני ליאת אצילי, אשת חינוך מניר עוז, אלמנתו של אביב אצילי ופדוית שבי.
לפעמים מתחשק לי להזמין לדו קרב את האיש שרצח את אבי והרס את ביתי ושילח אותי, עירום ועריה, לכל הרוחות של עולם הבריות הצר.
فإذا قتلني أكون قد ارتحت وإن أجهزت عليه أكون قد انتقمت.
אבל אם מתגלה במהלך הדו-קרב שיש ליריבי אמא שממתינה לו,
או אבא שמניח את כף ימינו על כברת הלב בחזהו בכל פעם שהבן שלו מאחר אפילו רבע שעה מעבר למועד שובו, או אז לא אהרגהו אם הכנעתי אותו.
كذلك أنا لن أفتك به إذا ظهر لي أن له أخوة وأخوات يحبونه ويديمون تشوقهم إليه.
או שיש לו אישה הססה לקראתו, וילדים שאינם אוהבים כשהוא נעדר, ושמחים במתנות שלו.
או שיש לו ידידים וקרובים, שכנים ומכרים, חברים לתא המעצר.
שותפים לחדר בבית החולים, רעים לספסל הלימודים, שמתעניינים במעשיו ומקפידים לומר לו שלום.
אבל אם יהיה ערירי, כרות עץ משפחה, שאין לו לא אמא ולא אבא, לא אחים ולא אחיות, לא אישה ולא ילדים, בלי חברים וקרובים ושכנים, בלי מכרים, בלי רע או עמית, בלי ידיד לרפואה.
فأنا لن أضيف إلى شقاء وحدته لا عذاب موت ولا أسى فناء.
רק בזאת אסתפק, אעלים עין ממנו כשיתקל בו ברחוב.
ואשכנע את עצמי שהתעלמות בפני עצמה גם היא סוג של נקמה.
ביאליק אמר, ארור האומר נקום.
ואנחנו נוסיף, ברוך האומר נקום.
ברוך האומר נקום. ברוך האומר נקום.
As time dragged on following October 7th and as hopes of a hostage deal felt further and further away following the first deal in November, a group of Israeli hostage families started the organization We Are All Hostages. This organization has been publicly speaking out about the Netanyahu government's unwillingness to negotiate a hostage deal and end the war. They are among the loudest and most consistent voices at rallies and protests in Israel, and have traveled across the world seeking international support from politicians and policymakers to pressure the Netanyahu government to sign a deal. They have also explicitly called out Jewish diaspora mainstream organizations for their unwillingness to support the specific demands of the wider hostage families movement. That Netanyahu take responsibility for October 7th and step down, that early elections be held, and that the Israeli government support an immediate and urgent ceasefire for the return of the hostages. This is obviously a very difficult day for those families. So in advance, Yehuda Cohen, the father of Nimrod Cohen, who was taken hostage to Gaza on October 7th, has sent us this video to share with you today.
My name is Yehuda Cohen. I'm the father of Nimrod Cohen. This is my son. He was kidnapped as a soldier on the morning of the 7th of October along with his tank team. They were outnumbered. They neutralized the tank. The terrorists actually murdered two of the teammates, and Nimrod and his commander were taken. My son, I know, is alive. Hostages returned on November, saw him there, and we're getting from Army intelligence sign of life. What we want, what I want as father of Nimrod, we need a deal. We need a hostage deal as fast as possible. We need a hostage deal along with a ceasefire. We need that ceasefire. And we know that the only person who's stalling this deal, doing everything that a deal won't come, is our Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We know that Netanyahu is acting from personal interest. His only aim is to stay Prime Minister, keep his position as Prime Minister, stay in power. And he knows that if he'll go for ceasefire, he will lose. He's extremist in the coalition who only wants to keep on so they can conquer permanently the Gaza Strip and so rebuild settlements. Netanyahu, as we all know, is on criminal trial. He's convicted on fraud, and he knows that if he loses his position as Prime Minister, his sentence will be speed up and he'll be convicted and go to jail. So we know that Netanyahu is acting from personal interest. He has no ideology. And if Netanyahu will be pressured hard enough, he will have no choice and go for a deal if it will be pressured hard enough from outside. That means from outside of Israel, US, Canada, big, strong Western countries that will pushing for a deal. We see how the war is escalating, meaning that now we're all the way in the north, and Iran is launching missiles all over Israel. It's not going anywhere, this war, only suffrage. Soldiers are being killed, civilians are being killed, civilians are suffering. Civilians from the north, nearly a year, are exiled from their houses. They're inner refugees in Israel, and things must end. A deal must come. Hostages are dying. We saw what happened a month ago with the 6 young hostages that were executed because the IDF keeps on maneuvering around Gaza, getting close where hostages are kept and causing the Hamas terrorists to execute them and flee. We must have a deal. We must finish it. We must finish this suffrage. My son-in-law is a year in the tunnels, deep inside the tunnels under Khan Yunis, Rafah. And after a year of fighting, so it won't be in vain. He must be released with all the rest of the hostages, and only a hostage deal with a ceasefire will bring it.
It is not enough to simply be mad or criticize what is going wrong. We must also work for the future we want to see and be brave enough to dream of a different world. That is the work being done by our friends at Heart to Heart, a summer camp that works in partnership with one of our partners, Camp Shomria. Heart to Heart brings Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel to camp in Ontario and works over the summer and throughout the year to support a new generation in becoming leaders who recognize the importance of building an inclusive society and who have the skills and motivation needed to make it a reality. In this video, initially recorded for the camp's annual fundraising event this past summer, alumni, campers, and parents speak about what life has been like for them since October 7th.
I've been feeling a variety of feelings that has affected my day-to-day life, some of which are stress, fear, and even feeling that I was unsafe in my own comfort zone. These feelings have actually made me feel like I was unwanted in some places that had connections with my day-to-day life.
Life since October 7th is just full of sadness. I lost the daughter of my cousin. I lost a good friend, a few other people I know. Another good friend was taken captive, and parents of another friend. So there's just so much sadness around. And then with so many fears of just more sadness looming ahead, and so many anxieties. And you're just surrounded by that. And what you need is to remember that things can be different, that this is not normal. So going into the iftar, I was thinking we'll talk the situation, current affairs, and nothing of that happened. And at first I thought maybe this is wrong, but then I thought, no, these casual conversations we had, these just enjoying ourselves and speaking to parents, Israeli Palestinian parents of other students, about the most mundane things, was just uplifting in a sense, because it just sort of reminded us that life can be normal. And then people can just communicate, even if they're Jewish and Palestinian. And if there was anything I would like to tell to people engaged in this, is that I think this is our mission, just to keep this even tiny flame of normalcy and hope for better life alive, and not let it'll be blown out. I just hope that will go on.
I did experience a lot of loss, I can share with you that you probably heard about the Nova party. The day before there was another party at the exact same place, the same stages, the same parking at Chenyon Re'im. And I was there at the Unity with plenty of my friends. I think we were 10, 15 friends. And we really considered staying for the Nova. 3 of my friends did go to the Nova. They stayed more than us. I left the place at Friday noon. 2 of my friends didn't make it. That was a really hard loss to... I still, I cannot really talk about it, but nothing really like made me ready for this thing. I'm only 20 and I lost 2 of my friends like on October 7th. Then October 12th I lost a very good friend of mine.
Since 7 October our life had went upside down and a lot of things had changed. For me in university and work there is a lot of gridlocks and not safety between us. So it was hard to us. Now we are doing well.
The days after, at least for me, were an extreme roller coaster of feelings, of fear, anger, and primarily those were the 2 feelings that I felt. The fear for my own life, for my family life, and fear for all the hostages and the kidnapped.
But I think what is worrying me the most at the moment is having to see all these brutal incidents and all the suffering of innocent lives that have been taken during this war, and still not being able to speak freely about it, in fear of being misunderstood by the Israeli government and my Jewish friends, for instance.
Since October 7th, life has been changed. The question is how? Since October 7th, everyone is in pain and also suffers from stress, fear, and much more. My daily basis, it's in college. I never felt that much of a changing between my Jewish friends and Arabic friends. I'm staying in contact with them and we help each other in studies. We laugh, we go on a break together, and everything is fine. But in our head, it's always the fear and the pain for both sides.
So, as we know, the conflict in the Middle East has not stayed there, and we see tension spilling over into our society here at home in Canada. In the age of social media, further silos and echo chambers, the rhetoric has become divisive and toxic and has too many times led to hate crimes and violence on our street. We condemn the multiple attacks on Jewish spaces and Jewish individuals, as well as on Muslim spaces and Muslim individuals. We cannot allow the worst of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to be imported into Canada. And as a peace-building nation, we must continue to strive for our Canadian values of inclusion, diversity, equity, and safety. To speak more to this, I want to invite 2 of our good friends, member for Winnipeg South Centre, Ben Carr, and Parliamentary Secretary Samir Zaberi, member for Pierrefonds-Doulard, to talk about the important work of the Canadian government in combating hate and divisiveness here at home. Welcome to you both. I'll get you to turn your cameras on and take yourselves off mute. I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. Thank you so much for being with us. And do we have
I am here, but I'm getting a message that says you can't start your video because the host has stopped it when I tried to.
Oh, that was my fault.
There
You
we
got
go.
it? There you go. Okay.
How are you today?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing? Thank you both. Thanks to both of you so much for joining us. I wanted to ask you, I wanted to start with this. It's not a surprise that we're seeing such a rise in hatred and divisiveness today. We're seeing, and we have heard from police that we're seeing increased security at synagogues, Jewish community centers, mosques, Muslim community centers. So I want to ask both of you, as two individuals, respectively Muslim and Jewish, who are serving a Canadian multicultural constituency. What are you hearing from your constituents during these times, and how are you holding what I imagine is the very real pain and trauma from your different communities? And why don't we start with you, Pia Saberi?
Thanks, Maytal. First off, thanks to JSpace and the New Israel Fund, and for everyone who has spoken thus far to really make this possible, to create this space, to hold this environment where we can gather together and mourn the loss of life that happened on October 7 and has happened since then. And this what you are doing is so important. And for all of those who are attending, your presence is also so important. So first off, I think that we need to acknowledge that properly and fully. As you know, as you point out, and so many others have pointed out, we find ourselves in extremely distressing and extremely challenging environment. But with respect to what Canadians have been feeling of multiple backgrounds, I always acknowledge that people are feeling sadness, pain, guilt, so many emotions, and these emotions are being felt across the board. And this is something that I think we need to acknowledge as a starting point. The deep pain, how the sorrow. I met families of those who have been taken hostage. I met families of people who have lost life over the last year. It's devastating, right? And I think that's a starting point for us, for myself, and maybe I'll pass it over to Ben.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for inviting us here today. Thank you, Samir, for your comments. I would echo much of that. I think it's been an extremely emotional year for people in my riding and across the country. And what's interesting for me is that I represent the largest Jewish population in Western Canada. However, there is this tension within the Jewish community itself as well, where you have folks who may be concerned with some of the policy approaches of the Netanyahu government, but who at the same time are fiercely proud to be Jews and are concerned that the ability to speak more forcefully in opposition to the Netanyahu government would come at the expense of hate and anti-Semitism that would be driven towards them and their friends and families. So they are uncomfortable doing so. And I think that this is in part true in the Muslim community and in the Palestinian community across the country as well. I think that there is a longing for respectful dialogue, for peaceful dialogue, for open-mindedness and understanding. And I think that that is far more widespread than we would be led to believe by virtue of the way we interact with news, primarily social media and the House of Commons. It's amazing, folks may think that Samir and I, for example, or Selma Zaid and I, or others would be very far apart by virtue of maybe votes that have taken place in the House of Commons or interviews that we've given, when in fact we're actually quite closely aligned on a variety of different things. And we meet regularly and discuss these things regularly because we believe that our job is to exemplify and represent the voices and opinions of the majority of both Jews and Muslim Israelis and Palestinians in Canada, which is to say that people want to get along. They want to be able to break bread together. They want to be able to have open-minded conversations that don't attack the core being of their fellow friends, colleagues, and family, but that allows for space to be created whereby we can talk about the discomfort that we may have about the way that the conflict is playing out, regardless of which side of the political equation you may land. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I think those I represent are scared, they're traumatized, they are uncomfortable. However, they are not opposed to or closed-minded when it comes to the necessity for this type of dialogue. And that's why more of this is so critical, because the echo chamber of social media and the echo chamber of parliament, unfortunately, is not going to serve as the type of medium that we would hope it would for us to advance the causes that I believe all of us on this call believe in.
Thank you so much for that answer. I could not agree with you more. And I feel the same way too. I think that we so often we are in our echo chambers because we believe that the other side doesn't want to leave their echo chambers. And as long as we both believe that about each other, we will stay there. So let me ask you a final question then, exactly on that topic, that in these times of tension, and we know it is no surprise that you've had protests at your offices. We've seen increased security, obviously, on Parliament Hill in Ottawa. This is a tense time. It's a tense time for you all as well, and you are very public figures. So why was it so important to you, despite all of that, to show up today together and speak together at an event like today's?
Well, for myself, and I know Ben too, but almost all parliamentarians are, at least from our party, the Liberal Party, I'm personally committed to bridge building, to making our world a better place for everyone, regardless of background, regardless of faith or ethnicity. And that is my core value and my core ethos. And being here today is doing exactly that. It is making sure that we are standing up for what's right, that regardless of what our background might orient us towards, but standing up for what is right. And for example, calling for the release of hostages is in and of itself right, as a singular ideal. Calling for a ceasefire is in and of itself right, as a singular ideal. And so I respect what you are doing. I respect the courage of each and every person who is here today listening. And I know that almost all who are listening are also working within your spaces to do exactly what this panel is doing and what all the speakers have done thus far and the presenters have done thus far, which is really to hold the space that we are holding right now, where we are able to have a reasonable exchange, one where we are not allowing our emotions to overcome us, where we are cognizant of what's happening. We're not going to paper over things, but where we are moving the world to a better place. So I truly believe in the work that is happening here at this moment, and that you're doing, Maytal, you and your team, and that's why it was so important to be here today.
Yeah, I would echo, a fair amount of that again. And I think that my job as a member of parliament, I believe, is to elevate myself above the noise, to elevate myself above my own personal opinions, and to try to put myself in environments where I can grow and I can learn and I can take the feedback that I get from people and use it to help broaden my understanding of perspective. That's in part why I think it's important as a member of parliament to be a part of discussions like this. But the other is that I think what often gets lost as public figures is that we get condensed down into being nothing more than what somebody says about us on Twitter or Instagram, or nothing more than the way we voted on a particular issue. And we have to be able to humanize our elected officials. just as we have to be able to humanize one another. So every opportunity that there is to expand that group of people that we can come in contact with, regardless of their views, in order to build a relationship and try to create that foundation from which we can build and grow, is incredibly important. And I think, as Samir said, I don't have a lot of experience with JSpace per se, but there are lots of Winnipeg connections, of course, and the conversations I have had with folks connected with the organization have always struck me as very reasonable, very balanced, and very authentic in the desire to pursue peace. So I'll end by saying that although some folks may be on this call and certainly within Parliament and in my constituency may disagree with this, I do believe that we all feel a sense of helplessness in terms of being able to impact the actual results of what's happening on the ground in the Middle East. So I default to my philosophy in life on all things, which is that I need to be able to control what I can control. And I can't control what Bibi does or what Hamas does or what Hezbollah does. What I can control is if I get invited to speak on a forum where the intention is to pursue peaceful dialogue, then I should be a part of that. If I can control helping to build bridges and diminish the tension and hostility that may exist between communities in my own backyard, then I need to be part of that which I can control. So all of that together is what makes me inclined and certainly open to being a part of discussions like this.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you. Proud to be one of the Winnipeg connections. Parliamentary Secretary Samir Zaberi, Member of Parliament Ben Carr, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for taking time out of your weekend to show up and have this conversation with us. I think I can speak for myself when I say you did give me a lot of hope here today, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gabriella Gallagher, the National Chair of Canadian Friends of Peace Now. We are partners to Peace Now in Israel, the country's oldest and best-known peace movement. For 46 years, Peace Now has advocated for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and opposed settlement expansion in the West Bank. For 41 of those years, Canadian Friends has stood in solidarity with our Israeli partners. We help fund their activities and we promote their message here in Canada, the message of a progressive, peace-seeking Zionism. Never has the need for the Israeli peace movement been greater. In the midst of spiraling war and in the face of extremist trends, Peace Now is telling Israelis truths they need to hear. It takes great courage to do so at a time when so much violence reigns and when Israelis are hurting, angry, and fearful. The Peace Now activists are therefore truly an inspiration. One of those inspiring people is Maurizio Lapchick, the Director of External Relations and Development for Peace Now. Born in Montevideo, Uruguay, in 1991, Maurizio moved to Israel in 2013 to pursue his studies in political science and comparative religion at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He graduated with a master's degree in 2021. Shortly afterwards, he joined the Peace Now staff. Maurizio is a passionate spokesperson for the values of Peace Now. Welcome, Maurizio.
Hi, hello.
Hi, Maurizio.
Hi, Metal. Hi, Gabriela.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for the sweatshirt.
We are.
Yes, excellent.
Thank you.
Mauricio, thank you so much for being with us here today. Let's do the same thing. I'll ask you a couple of questions as I did with our guests prior. I want to hear, being part of the peace camp, even before October 7th, there was so much discussion around how the peace movement, the left in Israel was, on life support. What did doing your work, the work of peace now, what did that look like in the aftermath of October 7th? And how has that evolved and changed in this year?
Well, first of all, thank you all. Thank you, JSpaceCanada and the New Israeli Fund and America and Canadians for Friends of Peace Now, of course. This is a great opportunity to speak to you at a time here of great uncertainty, pain, and fear. I stand before you here not only as a member of Peace Now, but as an Israeli who deeply loves this land and who believes also in the values of peace and justice and equality, and who understands also that real security at the end can only be achieved through ending this cycle of violence and the war and the occupation. After the 7th of October, everything changed, but quite of everything remained the same. And this is, I think, the most interesting thing, because, of course, the 7th of October for Israel was a huge trauma, and it still is, and we're still carrying that. And on the other side, many of the things that our government was doing before kept doing after the 7th of October, and nothing really changed on that sense. But what can I say is that the main thing that changed after 1 year of war, of trauma, of suffering from both sides, is that it is clear to everyone, even those who do not want to recognize that at the end of the day, we have two options here. We have one option, there is a perpetual war, a war that will last forever, and this is what our leadership is offering us. And on the other side, there is a way to avoid that destiny and bring a political solution with the Palestinians that will secure for everyone here in the region security and maybe in the future peace. Of course, one of the things that became much harder is to use that word, to use the word peace. Who will speak about peace in times of war, and especially after the terrible massacre of the 7th of October? But I must say that there is a need for this word, to use this word, and to not be scared of using this word. And this is something that we tried so slowly to convince our public first, and then the general public, that we shouldn't be ashamed to be the side who is asking for a fair solution, a political solution, and not only from war and more war and more war.
Thanks so much for that. So you talked about not only the trauma of Israelis, but also the love of Israel that Israelis have. And I think that is also something in the Jewish diaspora, of course, for those of us who may identify as Zionist or may just identify as loving Israel or caring about Israel, given that half the Jewish population lives there. I think that there's a lot of fear for a lot of folks in the diaspora about how we criticize or how we talk about Israel at a time when things are so difficult, when there is so much trauma, and when we see, a rise in anti-Semitism, in hatred, in divisiveness at home. I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about what it looks like and how we may model fighting for Israel from a place of love and compassion.
For sure, this is a very complex situation, and I can relate also because I chose to live here in Israel. I wasn't born here, as Gabriela mentioned before. I was part of Jewish youth movements, Zionist youth movements, and it was my conscious decision, and I always knew that this will be my home. And I think as everyone who believes that Israel is their home also potentially, I think that the only way to care about Israel is not only just defending Israel at all costs, but first of all is to believe that Israel should be the national home of the Jewish people and should be a democratic country as well that respects the rights of all people, Jews and Arabs alike. It means that fighting for Israel, where future generations can live without fear, not like now, because people here are living with fear constantly, where our children, your children, my grandchildren, your grandchildren don't have to serve in wars that will never seem to end. So I think that part of the Zionist identity today should be focused on asking the tough questions about the path that we are going now. It means that recognizing that the occupation is not just a political issue, it is a moral crisis, a human value crisis that undermines Israel's very soul. And this is an important thing. We cannot keep ignoring that. We cannot claim that we stand for democracy while we know that we deny the rights for millions of people living under occupation. We cannot claim that we want peace while expanding settlements that entrench the occupation and make the situation even worse. True Zionists, true patriots, true people that really love this country demand, or to be that person, demands a commitment to justice, to peace, to equality, to a vision of a political solution where the two people here can live side by side in security and peace. I think that this is the main core of the Israeli lover identity. I think that a lot of people in the diaspora share this feeling, and we shouldn't be afraid of saying this, that we have the right to criticize Israel because we love Israel, because we feel that this is our home, this is our family, and we have troubles in our home or with our families. We also have the right to criticize in order to change it for better.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I see why people march behind you at protests, Mauricio. I want to thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for those words. Thank you for inspiring us. Thank you for encouraging us to fight for the Israel that we want to see.
Thank you very much.
We, I think, also need to remember that we have partners in the Palestinian community who are equally committed to peace and equality and justice, and they are exactly who we must support and uplift to combat the hate and divisiveness we are seeing. I want to hear from one of them now. This is our good friend Bashar al-Shawa. Bashar has recently relocated to Toronto from Ramallah, Palestine, where he served as the advocacy manager for external and governmental affairs at EcoPace, a Nobel Prize nominee. He is currently the water diplomacy specialist for external relations and advocacy at Swim, Drink, Fish, where he is responsible for promoting the Water for Peace initiative. Bashar, thank you so much for being here today. It's so good to see you. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, yeah.
There you are.
I wish you hear me now. Yeah, thank you, Maital. And first of all, I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And thanks for every single one here for giving me, at least personally, that we're not left behind back home. And there are someone here caring about the misery that we're living back home. I just will start with a brief introduction about myself. I'm Bashar. I'm a Palestinian refugee who's originally from Gaza. And I was born as a second generation refugee outside Palestine and had the chance to go back home after a peace agreement, which is the Oslo, which allowed me to go back home and feel how it's the feeling living home. But I will make just use of this opportunity and going back to September 29th, 2023. I was with my Israeli colleagues from the Israeli Office of EcoPeace. We had this advocacy tour with diplomats, community leaders, experts, officials, and this advocacy tour was in the Gaza envelope area. We've been at Zikim, Sderot, Erez, and the entire tour was talking about our sending warning and high alert of expected explosion. Explosion will come as a result for messed up policies for years and years of avoiding the implementation of a just for long peace solution for this conflict. By whatever implementing conflict management, avoiding resolution, whatever we did, dusting under the carpet, led to October 7. And I want just to raise the issue that October 7 is a result, is not the reason, is not the root of the problem. And for sure, last year was a really tough. For me, on personal level, I lost lots of my people, my family members, friends, colleagues. From my family only, we lost until last 2 days 128 members, cousins, uncles, aunts, nieces, nephews, people I had stories and memories with. Me myself, since the first seconds of me was born, I'm affected by this conflict, by being a refugee. Me myself been shot during a peaceful protest back home in Palestine and spent months and lots of operations to walk back again. And I'm glad that I have the opportunity to speak to such audience and telling them one thing: please listen to the people back home. Please listen to the needs of Palestinians and Israelis and ask us what we do need. I moved to Canada, and I had the chance to come to Canada 3 months ago for 2 reasons. First of all, the personal safety and security of myself and hopefully my family, which I'm trying to bring here. They're still back home, my wife and my 4 kids. And second, because I don't want my kids to be raised in an environment full of hatred, revenge seeking, and dehumanizing the other. Coming to Canada with the stereotype that I would not face the shock that I saw here in Canada. I was shocked and surprised by the polarization taking place among the Canadian community. And unfortunately, the people who are interested in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict imported from the Middle East 2 worst things we have. First of all, dehumanizing the other, and second is losing hope. And when people lose hope, will do crazy things. And here it comes my request to the Canadian people, because regardless being pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli, let's agree to be pro-human. And let's listen to the people back home and to their needs. People back home wants to live in liberty, dignity, freedom, justice, and peace. And what's happening here, by gaining all this pain and investing in the wrong side, this is a huge mistake. So if we want to really do something, and here is my message to the audience. I know that here, the people of Canada, regardless, they are good people with good intentions, but they've been the same as the people back home, dragged by the mainstream, been hijacked by the spoilers. I call them spoilers because it's their game, and they are doing very well. They are managing their plan very well. And what we have here just to do 2 things. First of all, let's end this cycle of dehumanizing the other and justifying the hate of other. And second, let's build hope. And I'm not saying this as a dreamer. I'm saying this based on facts, the statistics, and you have the numbers, Mita. You can share it now. The people of Palestine, the people of Israel, if you go to the polls, you see that they are supporting a peaceful and justful solution for this conflict. Getting back to the memories of this October 7th, as a result, as a reaction, just remember that what happened in October 7th happened as a result of a messed up policies being taken by the leaders of Israel and Palestine and the international community. So here in the diaspora, in Canada, we do have the chance, first of all, to implement a dialogue with respect and humanizing the other, to understand the conflict, to understand the roots of the conflict and what we can do here. And being here today at this event is a good start, is a good step to avoid another October 7th in the coming years. And I'm just asking for one favor. Please do not end this war without a day after plan, without supporting a day after plan, because dealing with this war as another round of violence would be the biggest crime in the history of humanity.
Thank you so much for that, Bashar. You answered all of my questions. But I do want to take just a couple minutes to say that I think I probably speak for everybody on this call when I say that we share in your loss of so many of your family members since the start of this war. As you mentioned, your wife and 4 children are still back there. We know that the rockets that are flying in from the north do not stop at the green line. The Israeli government and the rockets do not stop at the green line. And we know that that's a heightened security concern for them as well. So we're all thinking of them. We're all praying for them. We thank you so much for your words. I thank you so much for helping us keep hope. And I hope this is the beginning of a really wonderful working relationship between organizations like ours, like the New Israel Fund of Canada, Canadian Friends of Peace Now, and you and all the knowledge that you're bringing. We're so lucky to have you here in Canada. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
After October 7th, many Israelis were hardened and sought revenge, but some bravely called for a different direction, to not respond with vengeance and to seek an alternative to death and destruction. One such activist is Magen Inon. Magen lost both his parents in the October 7th Hamas attack from the Israeli village Netiv HaAsara, one of the closest to the Gaza Strip. Magen is actually on a plane, I think, right now, flying back to Israel from London to be with his family for October 7th, but he was kind enough to send us this video and this message.
Hello everyone in Canada. My name is Magen Inon. I've been living in London for the last 10 years, but I'm originally from a village right on the Gaza border called Netiv HaAsara. Just almost a year ago, on October 7th, the village where I'm from was infiltrated by Hamas terrorists. And without getting into too much details, they murdered 20 people in the village. And sadly, my parents among them. It's been a very, very tough year, starting that day. It's hard to imagine that a year already has passed and the war continues. I flew to Israel the day after, on October 8th. I was already in Israel to spend time with my siblings, and we had a Shiva at my sister's place, which is not in the south. And it was really intense and very, very sad, but also very proud to hear from colleagues and friends of my dad and my mom. We had maybe thousands of people. And during that Shiva, it was very clear the kind of values I was raised by, because the people who came to mourn with us and pay their condolences came for every imaginable community in Israel, friends who are religious and non-religious, and Muslims and Christians and Jews and young and old, really any community you can imagine, who are all friends and even admirers of my parents. My parents touched them in many ways. And I'm the youngest of 5 siblings. We were there together, supporting each other with my nieces and nephews. And on the last day of the Shiva, we had a list of things we needed to talk about, and it was one of the things on the top of the list is what do we want our message to be? We realized we're going to get a lot of media attention, and we wanted to discuss it to see if we were on the same page. And we already started hearing people on social media, on mainstream media, calling for revenge. And almost immediately, the 5 siblings, we decided that we want to send a very clear message out that we are against revenge, that we believe people deserve security and respect and to live in dignity, and revenge is not the way forward. And so it was that message was picked up by many media outlets. I wrote an op-ed here in The Guardian in the UK in October, calling for a ceasefire and to stop the war. It might be depressing to see those things now, where we're still the war is still continues. But I want to share that even though it's been the most horrible year for us, there's also a lot of hope. We've met partners all over the world, and most importantly, also Palestinian partners. And we've been working together to model the kind of future that we want to see in the region. And we've been talking to the media and politicians and people like yourselves and everyone who's willing to hear what we have to say, which is the basic message that the only path to security is a shared future in which Palestinian rights are being upheld and Israeli rights, and ultimately human rights. And we think that's the only way that would provide a safe, dignified future for both peoples in Israel and Palestine. And even though it might seem as if we're the minority, at least speaking as an Israeli, we're the minority in Israel, it doesn't mean that we're wrong. We need to keep voicing our message, and I think that with time people would realize that more violence does not provide security, and it's actually the opposite. I also have to mention the hostages that have been on my mind and our minds for the past year. I've met many of the families, and my heart is with them. And again, I think it's disgusting to see the Israeli government who says that they care about the hostages, but really they don't. The hostages have been sacrificed. And it got to the point where the fighting in Gaza does not provide any kind of security to citizens of Israel, and hostages are just being sacrificed for the security of the coalition. And it's appalling to see, and I really hope we will see a new government in Israel as soon as possible. But really want to send this message out that there is the peace movement is growing. We feel it everywhere, and ultimately, whoever thinks that the land between the river and the sea will be wholly theirs, whether it's Hamas or it's the violent settlers, they are selling an illusion. And the reality is that there are 7 million Jewish Israelis, and there are 7 million Palestinians, and it might take 5 years or 10 or 20 or 50, but like other conflicts in the world, it would come to an end and there would be a diplomatic solution. It's just a question of time. And what we're trying to do is get there sooner rather than later, and save as many lives as we can on the way. And lastly, what I think you can do to help. So you can support organizations like JSpaceCanada and other organizations worldwide. I think always what I'm trying to do is not win the argument. That's not the point. We want to change reality. In order to change reality, we need partners. So even if someone is being very annoying, whether it's within your community or on the pro-Palestinian side or pro-Israeli side, doesn't matter. I try not to be annoyed and try and make them a partner. It starts by listening and recognizing the trauma that we're all suffering, that we're all afraid, that we're all scared, that we're all angry. But I think once we recognize that, we can move beyond that, treat ourselves and try and treat others, listen to what they have to say, to their concerns, and move forward, because only together we can overcome the pain and the trauma and offer a better future for our kids. You can also pressure politicians or community leaders. Just to mention that the fact that Canada sanctioned a real estate company called Amana, who provides the most extreme settlers with funding, it's a huge deal. It's great that Canada did it, and no other country has done it yet. And this is something we can use here, for example, in the UK, when we talk to politicians, when we're asking them to do the same. So it really is an international effort. Lastly, I really hope we will be in a different place next year. And even though things look very bleak at the moment, we can see the light shining in with our partners and with the communities that invite us to speak, just like yourself. I wish you Shana Tova, Happy New Year, and I hope we're starting a much better future for everyone. Bye.
So for anyone who joined us, I think quite a few months ago, we had Magan's brother Maoz speak to us, and something about that, like make partners even with people who are annoying. I have to go back and remind myself of that. They're both so good at that. And someone else who I think is really great at that is one of the partners to Magen Inon. They could not do this work without equally brave Palestinian partners, themselves victims of violence and oppression under the Israeli occupation. One of those Palestinian activists working with Magen Inon is Aziz Abu Sara. Aziz Abu Sara is a Palestinian author, peacemaker, and entrepreneur with a background in conflict resolution and tourism development. Aziz, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Mital.
So, we heard a bit of Magen's story. I was wondering if you would be so kind as also to share your story, your life living in Palestine under occupation, and what brought you to your work today.
Yeah, I grew up in Jerusalem. I encountered, I guess, occupation since I was a little kid, and I never knew exactly that it wasn't normal. And that's a crazy thing about growing up there. You think everything you go through is what every other child around the world probably is going through. So one of my early memories, for example, is going to school, and we had soldiers firing tear gas in my school, and I went back home and I told my mom, I'm not going to school anymore. And I made this whole argument why school is not worth going to, because it's too dangerous, and I think school is not important. And so my mom had to sit down and try to convince me why I should go to school. And the way she did it is she gave me an onion, and she said, if there's tear gas, you put the onion close to your nose and it will help you not suffocate. And so for the next few years, every day I went to school, I made sure my onion is still fresh. And this became more important than my homework. It became more important than my lunch. Which is good, because if you forget your lunch, you can eat the onion, I guess. But it became such an important part of my life. And it took me so many years before I realized, no, that's not normal. But that's just a small aspect of the daily things that people don't get to hear about that are part of your life. Again, I also lost somebody in my family, actually a few people in my family. My brother was killed in the first Intifada. He was in Israeli prison, was beaten up in prison by Israeli soldiers to get a confession from him that he threw rocks at Israeli soldiers. And as a result of it, he died because of that beating. And other people in my family, my dad's cousin, who was our neighbor, was killed. Our next door neighbor, who was my brother's best friend, was killed. All of these were killed in the same year, in the midst of the first Intifada, 1990 to 1992. It was literally every other week, kind of feels like now, every other week, somebody we knew was dying. So I grew up with that. I didn't believe in peace and conflict and how to solve this thing is it through peace, because I was very angry, and I believe that revenge is the only path. So unlike Magen and Maoz, who quickly pivoted toward peace from their tragedy, it took me 8 years for that to happen. And I went through a journey of transformation, realizing that one, hating doesn't make things any better. Actually, the opposite, that every time you hate, or in my case, every time I hate, I was being a slave to the soldier who killed my brother. And that not only did he kill my brother, now he was controlling my life. And so choosing a different path was also redeeming for myself. And secondly, realizing that this shouldn't be an Israelis versus Palestinians, Muslim versus Jews, any of those kind of divisions. It really has to be, and it must be, those of us who believe in dignity and equality and justice, and recognition and safety and security for everyone between the river and the sea, and those who don't yet. And so our mission has been to try to convince those who don't yet to join us and to be part of this effort.
Thank you so much for that. That's a really thank you for sharing that personal story with us. That's that's really touching and gives us an insight, of course, into kind of how you grew up and how you got to where you got to. And so I want to ask on that note, you know, you like you said, you had this journey, you came to this place. For folks who are maybe still struggling on that journey or don't quite know what to do or how to help, for folks who feel torn between the pro-Israel side or pro-Palestine side, what is the best thing that they can do to be an ally and a partner to people like you, Magen and Maoz, Hamza, those of you that are working on this path? What is the best way for those of us who are still on our journey?
I think we are all on that journey, including me and Maoz and Hamza. And we have better days and we have worse days. We need each other to be able to get to the finish line. But I would say the first thing is have grace and empathy. Like when on October 7th, I'm a Palestinian, but that I didn't think of it. I'm a Palestinian. People who are getting killed were Israelis. The day after, I reached out to the known family, to Maoz, and told him that, to me, first offered my condolences and told him that I'm with him. My heart is with him. I support him. I understand the pain. My friend Vivian Silver was killed in that day. So have empathy regardless of who the victim is, and show people that you have empathy. I think that's the first thing where we start and connect to our humanity and our shared mission. If we can't have empathy for somebody because they're different than us, they look different, they have different faith, they have different nationality, then we are so far, and we have to really rethink what our priorities are, what we care about. The second, I would say, is to amplify those voices. You mentioned Maoz and me and Hamza, and there are many others. You interviewed some of them earlier. I think amplify those voices. Our voices have to be, it's much harder to get our voices across, whether it's in media or whether it's online or so on, than those who calling for hate and destruction and kill them all kind of message. That somehow gets shared much faster, and people like this get hosted on TV all the time. So we need you, people who are listening, to do that. Make sure that, because of the absence of political leadership, we have to become the new leaders. And so we need the legitimacy from people to do that. We need you to stand with us to do that, to push peace activists on politicians, to say that a next negotiation, peace meeting, whatever, wherever decisions are being made, we must be invited. It can't be only politicians who don't know a thing about peacemaking. And that's not only Israelis and Palestinians. I'll include Europeans and Americans and Canadians. Unfortunately, it's people who get in the room who never really successfully done peace work, and you need to have us in that room. And finally, I would say start pushing your politicians to change policies. Magen mentioned the issue of sanctioning organizations that are making this conflict so much worse, pushing for settlements, confiscation of land. We need much more of that kind of change of policy. We often, Maoz and I, when we were in Congress recently, we told members of Congress, you just sent $20+ billion worth of weapons to Israel. Iran is sending weapons to Hezbollah, and none is sending really any support. Or if they do, it's so small for creating a solution. You investing so much in war, and it's not only this year, for the last 40, 50 years, you're investing so much in war, and there's so little investment in peace. Now, that's on us. If you're a citizen in any of those countries, including Canada, it's on you to push your politicians to change that policy. We don't need just more bombs. We need their commitment to making peace happen, and not conflict management, but conflict resolution. We're done with this idea of let's just make it quiet for a while and then we'll figure it out. That doesn't work. It hasn't worked. This is why we are where we are today, is that type of thinking that we can allow status quo to remain.
Yeah. And we know that status quo is always a mirage. It always gets worse. It does not actually stay a status quo. Aziz, you're our last speaker for today, and I know that today and the rest of this week and this month and this year is going to be hard for so many of us for so many different reasons. So the last thing I want you to leave us with, if you don't mind, what gives you hope and what should give us hope?
I think what gives me hope is that are those of us who refuse to be bogged down by this idea as we must be enemies, that you're Israeli and I'm Palestinian, and standing together and understand that we are the antidote to extremism, to hate, to war ourselves. And maybe I'll end with a story. It'll take 1 or 2 minutes. And it's Israeli story. It's from an Israeli author, Amos Oz, where when he was asked a similar question, he said, imagine you are walking and you see a building on fire. You have 3 options of what you can do. The first option, he said, is you run away. And many people look at what's happening in Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine, and Gaza, and they go, I don't want to be involved because it's far away. It's not my fire. Why do I need to go and help? However, we know how fire spreads. And even if it's far away, fire could reach you. But in general, if you see people in need, you should help. But that's one choice, to run away. The second choice is to create a committee to investigate who should you blame for the fire. By the time you decide who you like to blame, everybody in that building would be dead. And that happens even more today. I see it so much on social media. I see it so much in the news. I see it so much of our politicians. This idea is like, well, they are terrible. There's no way to make peace. I'll blame them, and that's it. We'll wait until the next generation. No, that's not a solution. The third option, say you get a bucket, you fill it with water, and you throw it on the fire. But you might say, I don't have a bucket. So then you get a cup, you fill it with water, and you throw it on the fire. And you might say, I'm sorry, we don't have any cups. And then you get a spoon, you fill it with water, and you throw it on the fire. Now, one person with a spoon will not be able to put out this fire. But the thing is, each one of us might have a cup, might have a spoon, might have a bucket. There's a journalist who recently was working on illustration. She said, if you don't have any of these, then maybe through our tears, we will put out that fire. And I think that's what we have to think about. Don't think of the impossibility of our mission, because I think when people look at Israel and Palestine, especially today, they feel depressed, they feel hopeless, and they think it's impossible. If you focus on how I'm going to make peace happen, sure. But instead, if you focus on what can I do, something small that would make a difference, that's how hope is created.
Wow. Such a great note to end it on, despite everything going on. Aziz, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for your time. Thoughts and prayers with your family, your friends, your loved ones, and wishing for a more peaceful new year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Historian Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi, in his book Zachor, Remembrance or Memory, speaks of Jewish memory. He makes the point that Jewish memory is not a dispassionate telling of the past. Jewish memory is alive and is in our present. In fact, Yerushalmi points out that it is a mitzvah, commandment, for us to remember. During all our holidays and observances, we not only remember and commemorate the past, but by doing so, we keep the memories alive and become active participants in how this memory lives on. This is a poem, Remember, by Rina Levanon, the rabbi of the Gilboa Regional Council who lives in Kibbutz Kfar Blum, located on the northern front line. We remember our brothers and sisters, the loyal and faithful, the brave and courageous, whom we lost amidst the horrors of war. We remember the shining eyes, the warm embrace, the confident heart, the photo albums, the life stories, the homes built with great effort and burned in an instant. We remember the loving families, the beauty, the hope, the eyes that look upon us with trust. May the souls of those who left us be bound up in the bond of life, and their memory be connected to us by a thin thread of life, like a bouquet of wildflowers and rainwater, skulls, golden puddles, almond trees, oleanders, and mulberries. Laughter carried on the flight of swings, a beating heart, tenderness, and compassion. May our souls be connected to them in deep memory and gratitude, and may we choose life. We remember and we choose life. In the gentle hand extended, in the thin ray of dawn, in the sprouting stem, in the breath of earth. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to thank our presenting partners, the New Israel Fund of Canada and Canadian Friends of Peace Now. I want to thank our promotional partners, Amenu Canada, J-Link, the International Progressive Jewish Network, Or Shalom, Vancouver's East Side Shul, the Reformed Jewish Community of Canada, Canadian supporters of Women Wage Peace, Congregation Shir Libenu, HaShomer HaTzair Camp Shomria, Solo Congregation, and Merits Canada. I want to thank our speakers, Rabbi Gila Kane, Maurizio Lapchik, Bashar El-Shawa, Magen Inon, Aziz Abusara, Yehuda Cohen, Member of Parliament Ben Carr, Parliamentary Secretary, and Member of Parliament Samir Zaberi. I want to give a huge thank you to Hannah Blazer, Development and Operations Associate at the New Israel Fund of Canada, for running all the tech and organizing all the speakers and video for the entire duration of today's commemoration. I'll be honest, figuring out what to say to close this event has been the most challenging part of the planning. I want to share with you something an Israeli friend of mine said. She was remarking on the discourse in the diaspora around October 7th. It's clear to me that in the diaspora, October 7th is in the past. For us, it is still October 7th, today and every day. So I think back again to what Yerushalmi said about Jewish memory, of it being alive and present, and nothing captures that as well as that statement. Memory is also alive and present in what we are watching today as the response to October 7th by the Israeli government. We see the many, many lives of Israelis, Palestinians, Lebanese, lost, shattered, changed forever. And so what I'm thinking about is the time period that we're in, Yamim HaNoraim. It's also a transition period, right, between two observances, our New Year and our Day of Atonement. And in those days, our Jewish tradition actually gives us space and guidance for how to transition between these observances. So however you choose to mark today, tomorrow, this week, this year, in whichever way you transition between all of these very alive, living memories, all of it is valid and important. Let us seek to honor and remember every soul, every individual, young and old, who departed from us. Let us be active participants in remembering and fulfill this mitzvah by taking action. We take our memories, our pain, and our struggle, and we turn them into a drive for change, for peace, democracy, and freedom. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us today. I wish you an easy as possible tomorrow as we enter the 1 year since the attacks of October 7th. And of course, for those observing and fasting on Yom Kippur beginning Friday evening, wish you an easy and meaningful fast. Thank you so much.